Assalamualaikum guys, welcome back. Let's get into it.
I think after France and Great Britain said they were recognizing a Palestinian state over the last week, Canada actually had very little choice but to follow them. Recall that in May, Canada joined with the United Kingdom and France in strongly criticizing Israel with respect to what was going on in Gaza and how Israel was conducting its military campaign. And they said that there was further unspecified things would happen if things hadn't changed. Canada has long proclaimed its commitment to international law and to a rights-based approach to solving world problems. I think often, unfortunately, there's a fairly big gap between aspiration and what Canada actually does. And certainly in the history of Canada's foreign policy towards Israel and Palestine, um, it has generally been a laggard rather than a leader in taking bold steps on the.
Like I said before in my other videos, that this is the end goal. Alright, fair enough, they need a Palestinian state, but in order for that to happen, you need to stop the bombings. You know, how can people live on their normal lives when the bombs going off? Where they gonna go? They're going up and down to the south or to the north, being killed each way they go. They need to have secure uh people on the ground. Not Israeli military, maybe a different country military. They can help secure it from people from bombing them, Israelis from bombing them. That's what we need to see happen. Then you can establish a Palestinian state.
Diplomatic front.
I was told very explicitly, directly to my face, that our client is the IDF.
Your client is the IDF.
Our client is the IDF. And this came out in a discussion once where I was in the control room. I was on I was on control room duty that day. We had shifted responsibilities on a rotational base. So I was in there that day with the radio observing site number 2 distribution. A Palestinian man had picked up some children to let them step on his shoulders to get onto a berm because they were being crushed in the crowd. Site 2 is very small, smallest of all 4 sites. And these children are being crushed, and he picked them up there and put them up on the berm. And the Israeli Defense Forces liaison officer in the main control center with us comes up to the screen that I'm watching, and he says, "Tell your men to get them down." I was like, "We got this under control." I was like, "I know they know what they're doing. No, they're children. Let's calm down. Mm-hmm. Get them down now, or I will." Well, there's no IDF on the site, so I didn't take it as much of like much more than just being bombastic and like, okay, like, hey, we got this. He leaves and goes to his desk in the operations center, and he gets on the radio and he speaks something on the radio. It was in Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew. One of the contractors that was there was American that did speak Hebrew, and he notifies me. He said, "Hey, he just told the snipers at the IDF position, because the site number 2 is co-located with an Israeli base." Mm-hmm. He said, he just told the snipers to take these kids out. I was like, "On the radio?" He's like, "Yeah." This lieutenant colonel then comes back up and he says, "Get them down." And I look at him and I say, "Did you just call on the radio and tell your men to shoot them?" And he said, "I'm going to take care of this if you don't." I said, "You are not going to shoot. You are not going to shoot children. You're also not going to shoot because if your men miss, you're going to hit others. You're not going to shoot." Thank God we didn't come to the conclusion of figuring out whether he would or not, because the children jumped down and ran off of the site. They didn't want to be there. They were unarmed. They didn't have shoes. One wasn't even wearing a shirt. They were starving. The chief operations officer for Safe Reach Solutions, our higher headquarters, so to speak, in the contract, beckoned me outside with him, and he looked at me in the face and he said, "Never say no to the client." And I asked him, I was like, "I didn't know the client was in there. Who's here? Did Johnny Moore come to visit?"
Right.
And he said, "No, the IDF." I was like, "The IDF are our client?" He said, "Yes, we work."
This is one of many stories that soldiers go in, American soldiers, and we keep witnesses. They see themselves what's going on, what the Israeli mentality is. The man just said, "Take these kids out." He's been ordered to take these kids out. Doesn't make any sense. Kids, innocent kids, in a very narrow, very tight place to get aid. The parent, put them in a high place because they were getting crushed. And obviously Israeli knows that. So no, we want you to stay down, get crushed. Otherwise we're gonna take you out. We're gonna get the snipers and shoot you. But alhamdulillah, nothing happened. This is just crazy how these Israelis think, you know. I should say Zionist, not all Israeli, but Zionism. Zionist is, I don't know, man. It's just crazy.
For them. A light bulb went off in
The problem is that Israel doesn't simply use Iron Dome in a defensive capacity. It uses Iron Dome to project force abroad. It's because it has Iron Dome that it acts so recklessly, because it knows it has impunity. It's because it has American support that it can do what it does. I can think of no other country on planet Earth that has attacked 5 different countries in the last year. Israel has attacked Iran, Syria, Yemen, and of course, West Bank and Gaza, constant bombing of both of those places, and Lebanon, right? So 4 countries plus occupied Palestinian territories. Part of the reason it's able to do that is because it says, well, I'm the bully in the neighborhood. I'm the big boy. I've got the superpower behind me. I've got Iron Dome. Come get me. And I think that's a fundamental part of its strategic thinking, is that we can act aggressively, recklessly, unilaterally, preemptively, if that's the phrase they want to use, because we have this support from Big Brother United States in the form of Iron Dome, and not just Iron Dome. You know, you remember last year when Iran and Israel first exchanged missiles, it was the American Air Force, it was the Jordanians, the Saudis, all came to Israel's defense to block some of those Iranian drones and missiles. So I think as long as, look, my sorry to use a crude analogy, my analogy has always been, Israel reminds me of the child in the playground that goes around picking fights with everyone, knowing that his big brother will come along and sort everything out if things go wrong. And big brother has to say to little brother, I'm not there for you anymore. Fight your own battles. See how that goes. And maybe then little brother will stop going around picking fights with everyone.
In Gaza, if no hostages are released between now and September, will you still recognise a Palestinian state?
Look, our requests that all hostages must be released and that Hamas can play no future role in the governance of Gaza or a Palestinian state are long-standing. Now, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and Hamas are terrorists, and that's why we don't get into a to and fro with them as to what we want them to do. That's absolute in terms of our requests. What we are seeking to do is use the moment of recognition of a Palestinian state in a way that allows us to genuinely try and move this conflict forward, end it not just in the short term, but for the long term as well. Of course, get aid into Gaza, which is absolutely key, but use this moment to try and genuinely say what we have witnessed is so appalling, so horrific, the suffering on both sides, that we have to try surely and move this on for good. And that
Alright, fair enough. Let's just say Hamas is terrorist. Let's just say that. What about your ally, Israel? Are they not terrorists? Fair to call on that. You know, the reason why you want to recognize Palestinian state because of what the crimes they're doing. You know, maybe you should tell them to stop bombing and stop giving them aid. Not aid, giving military weapons and all that stuff.
requires a two-state solution. That is why recognition of a Palestinian state is so important.
I don't believe Israel wants peace. Israel's behavior over the last year and a half gives me every indication that they're not interested in peace. They are carrying out the slaughter of innocent people, both in Gaza and the West Bank. They're doing it with absolutely no brakes in that car. And it's unacceptable that U.S. taxpayers are bankrolling that genocide. It gives me a great deal of shame to know that. But unfortunately, our politicians here are bought. I do wonder what exactly our politicians would actually think if they weren't bought by lobbying groups like AIPAC, for instance. But alas, we have corruption baked into our political system. And as a result, the American people and civilians in the Middle East have to suffer on behalf of the Israeli government.
Alright guys, I'm going to end the video there. If you're new to the channel, please like, share and subscribe. Assalamu alaikum.